Hello, I'm Toycat, and today I wanted to talk about a country which doesn't exist. And I know that sounds like a strange thing to do because lots of things don't exist, but no, this is an example of a territory in Europe which very almost became a country, and which, if it had become a country, would be one of the weirdest in Europe and perhaps in the world, because it's an example of a territory which just has a series of never-ending anomalies to do with how it was formed, to do with how it was governed, and to do with how it kind of developed in terms of language, in terms of currency, and it would have just not matched any other European country. So let's talk about exactly how it came to be, because this is the story of Neutral Morsnet. So this is what Neutral Morsnet looks like, superimposed on today's borders. As you can see, it exists in modern day Belgium, but it was actually a territory agreed between the Netherlands and between Germany. That's right, the Netherlands and Germany got to pick what was, today a part of Belgium, and the simple reason for that was because in 1816, after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, Europe had to be put back together, so they had to re-establish the Kingdom of the Netherlands state, which at the time included Belgium and included Luxembourg. So yeah, that meant that they, this one country and this country over here had to agree their brand new borders. Basically, Germany and the Netherlands had to agree their, common border, and it was fairly easy to do for most of it. They could come to easy agreements for everything until you reach this point right here, where, surprise, surprise, Neutral Morsnet comes up. So basically, this whole area was wanted by both sides very, very much because it contains a zinc mine, a valuable material at the time, something both sides wanted to exploit, and neither side wanted to give it away. So they came to an agreement eventually, after a lot of negotiating, that what they should do is, because again, this whole area was wanted, they'd give the eastern side, so the side to the east of it, to the border today, to Germany. It was actually to Prussia, but I'm simplifying. They'd give it to Prussia or Germany. To the Morsnet Chapelle would go to the Netherlands, and then they could have this area in between, which had the zinc mine in. Instead of giving it to either side, they would have it be a condominium, owned by both countries at the same time. That's right, co-sovereignty is not something that's done very often in the world, and for kind of good reasons, because it left the territory in a very weird state where it was not officially part of either country, and therefore had a bunch of weird rules, and was, as you can expect, used for a bunch of weird things that you'll see as we go forward. So let's just mention that in 1830, what actually happened is Belgium became independent, which meant that this actually then went to, Belgium dash Prussians co-sovereignty, or again, Belgium, German, just to keep things simple, co-sovereignty, which means this country was owned by both of them at the same time, and that also meant that when Belgium became an independent country, the world's first and only, to this day, again, in modern history, quad point was recorded, because there was Belgium here, there was Germany there was the Netherlands there, which is, by the way, still a tri-point state. You can visit it, and I've made a video about that, but also Neutral Morsnet made it a 4-point border if you count the condominium neither side territory as being its own independent country, and to some extent it was. Like, it was so much of a country that it even had its own little flag, which looked like this, by the way, arguably a cross between the German Empire flag and the Dutch flag, arguably just its own thing, but yeah, basically it was an almost country. So let's talk about what actually went on in, this territory, which is now just called Kelmis, but let's talk about what went in Neutral Morsnet, because there was a zinc mine, which means that a, zinc mine company came in, and they set up everything in the town. They ran the banks, they ran the supermarkets, they ran all the shops that people would need to work there and get stuff done, and they also imported a bunch of people to come live in Kelmis, to come live in this neutral territory. So yeah, that's kind of cool by itself, that like one company kind of owned everything about the place and had a lot of influence. The government budget for the place was fixed over the entire time, so had a smallish government. Everyone's getting on board with it now. But the crazy things about it is when you try to work out, so what language did they speak there, and what currency did they use? Because again, it's between Belgium and it's between Germany. The German mark or the Belgian franc. You might be like, maybe both at the same time. And although both currencies saw some use, weirdly enough, despite being in between those two countries, it actually used the French franc. That's right, they used the French franc in this territory for the most part, for I guess reasons of compromise, like, well, we can't use ours, can't use yours, so we'll use theirs instead. And although there was a lot of German spoke there, it was also the largest single source of the Esperanto community. That's right, the Esperanto community managed to be this is something I can never quite understand. So if you don't know, Esperanto is a constructed language. It comes from nowhere, and they figured that this would be a great place to kick it off, because again, it's this weird territory that belongs to no one, so why not make a neutral language and introduce it there? And rather than being like, let's just speak French, which was technically kind of like the Belgian language, it's like, oh, why don't we go ahead and make Esperanto language? So this was at one point going to be an Esperanto state. They had a lot of aspirations. They tried to make it, seem more and more like a country. And as a result of, a lot of beneficial policies of being able to be not quite either of the two countries that owned it, they set up casinos there. They had distilleries there, because they had, advantageous tax positions, easy way to export and import into both countries. And at one point, because there were huge wars going on in Europe, a lot of people would come to live there just to avoid the drafts of the equivalent drafts. They're not called that in Germany or Belgium, but to avoid the draft, they'd move into Neutral Morsnet until, there was a lot of threats to break up the territory because of that. And basically, yeah, Neutral Neutral was the weirdest country because it created the world's only quad point border, that has been found to this date. You can think of a lot of examples, but if you look closely in Google Maps, they're not quite quad points. So the only world's quad point, owned by two countries at the same time, a weird condominium, owned by a zinc mine that wasn't really owned by the government, used Esperanto, a language which to this day is barely spoken. Again, it's a constructed language that just adds to the pool of languages, but it used a language which has never had a state besides this one case, and it used a currency which wasn't from the area, it was just the French franc for compromise reasons. It's the weirdest place. So what ended up happening to Neutral Morsnet? Why am I talking about the country that almost existed? Why is this not the wackiest example of a European microstate? What went wrong here? So unlike all the other European microstates that still exist because they got kind of lucky during wars, I'm looking at you, Liechtenstein, like, they got lucky. Let's just be honest on that one. However, Neutral Morsnet was not so lucky because it is in the exact place that Germany does need to invade for both wars. I mean, the German World War strategy seemed to be both times. Why don't we just invade neutral countries where they don't expect us to? And that involves Belgium being invaded, and at the same time, they wanted Neutral Morsnet that whole time. Bismarck had, particular, aspirations to take back Morsnet. So when there was a good opportunity, i.e. World War I, they figured, let's take it back, make it our own thing. And at the end of World War I, they decided to, obviously the Treaty of Versailles, whole thing, lots of territory lost by Germany. And one of the key bits of territory that had to be given back was the territory of Neutral Morsnet, nowadays known as Kelmis. So again, after they got it back, they renamed it Kelmis. They made it part of the German-speaking community of Belgium, which, again, weird story, but, there's lots of Germans in Belgium. There's lots of German people in Belgium, or German speakers at least in Belgium, and this is one of the reasons for that. And at one point they tried to sell it. Belgium tried to sell all of this stuff back to Germany and make it just a part of Germany, but France intervened and said, no, you're not allowed to do that. And that's where our story ends. Neutral Morsnet becomes Kelmis. It's a weird village where, again, there's still more than average Esperanto speakers, and there's only one person alive to remember the story of this place. And I think that's just a cool little end to this whole thing. That, countries can almost exist. Countries can exist for weird reasons, but for every example of a Liechtenstein where you have a country that got lucky, managed to last out, every example of Monaco, you have an example of a Neutral Morsnet where a country was small and advantageous to one of the sides, so got torn up or belonged to one of the countries. And in this case, despite neither of the two countries that originally, signed up for Neutral Morsnet wanting to own it, it ended up in Belgium's hands anyway. So Kelmis, there you go. The world's only quad point existed here, and I wanted to tell you about it in today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. So I want to just quickly mention by the end here, in case you're curious about how I got Morsnet show on a map. There's a cool Google Maps feature that I've only just discovered. Maybe I'm the ridiculous one, but you can actually add your own little overlays onto map to shows some of the old countries or highlight particular regions. So I'm going to be doing that more in videos. I'm going to work out weird reasons for it. So if you see the videos are covered in weird shapes, that's the reason why. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed it. See you all in the next one. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.